It's now bright and early on the morning of day 3. Let's see what the dough looks like. Well, you can obviously see the dough has risen quite nicely even while in the refrigerator for the last 24 hours. So now what I'm going to do is turn it out onto the counter, which will deflate it considerably, pretty much all the way. And I'm going to shape it into a boule and let it rise one more time before baking. I'm going to apply downward pressure along the sides of the dough, turning my hands kind of down and inward to tighten the surface of the dough up here, create kind of a tight skin. And at the same time apply downward pressure on the counter as I rotate the dough, and that'll help close the seam at the bottom. So you can see that the bottom is smoothed out quite nicely. There's still a little bit of a indentation there, but that's not really a big deal. So I do this for about, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And then I'm going to place it upside down in a well-floured proofing basket. This can be a basket like this, or it can be a basket like this, or it could just be a bowl, a mixing bowl with a floured towel draped on the inside. And I'm going to flour it well with both rice flour and regular flour. Regular flour just because it'll create a nice design on the bread, but it actually isn't that good to prevent sticking, which is why we're flouring in the first place, is so the dough doesn't stick to the basket. This rice flour works really well. They're like tiny ball bearings. Okay, I kind of over-floured it, but that won't be a big problem. Then I just kind of turn it around to distribute the flour more evenly. I'm going to place the dough in the basket upside down. And then sprinkle a little flour on top for good measure. Actually, it's more than just good measure. It keeps the dough from sticking to the towel as it rises. Cover it with a towel and let it sit at room temperature until it's ready to bake. Now, because the dough is extremely cold, it's going to take a while for the yeast to get, to wake up and start doing their thing again. So it's going to be a good 4 or 5 hours before it's ready to bake. So I'm just going to keep my eye on the dough, and when it looks like it's risen a good bit, I'm going to preheat the oven to about 475, 485, and bake it. Okay, it's been almost exactly 4 hours since I put the dough in the proofing basket, and you can see it's risen quite nicely. It's over the top of the basket, and in the next half hour that it takes to fully preheat the oven, it'll definitely be ready to bake. So I'm going to put my trusty La Cloche into the oven and preheat the oven to 485 or thereabouts, and give it about 35 minutes to fully preheat. Now that the oven is fully preheated, we're going to move on to one of my favorite steps. I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly, but not so quickly as to be careless. I'm going to put my fingers over the dough like this and invert it and drop it from as low a point as I can above the La Cloche and let it drop out under its own weight, and then score it with a razor blade or a sharp serrated knife. Should be okay. And then we'll put it in for 30 minutes with the La Cloche lid on. Then after 30 minutes, I'm just going to take the lid off and bake for another 15 minutes at 450. Okay, it's done baking. So the first thing I'm going to do before I put it on the rack to cool is I'm going to measure the internal temperature just to make sure that it's fully cooked inside. What you can do is just place one of these instant read thermometer probes into the interior of the bread, and it should reach at least 200 degrees. Okay, so it's plenty well cooked. And this is especially important if you're trying a recipe out for the first time. If the bread turns out to be kind of gummy inside, that's usually just because it's undercooked. So I'm going to put it on a wire rack to cool. Now, I did a really lousy job of scoring the bread, so you have these huge ears there, which is nice if you're baking baguettes, but this is not the effect I wanted to get. But this half worked out fine, so I'll just show people this half. Okay, it's all cooled off, so let's slice it and see what we have. It's moist and tender, very nice texture. This loaf is what I would call a hearty, healthy, full-flavored European country-style bread with a nice sourdough tang. Good enough to eat plain and not bad toasted and slathered with butter. A solid staple in your bread baking repertoire.